The Prime Minister, who will now gavel this conference to order. Let's go down to the floor to hear from Prime Minister Mulroney.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to call this conference officially to order. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. C'est avec grand plaisir que je déclare ouverte la présente conférence. In 2 words, let me sum up the position of the federal government. To the Aboriginal peoples of Canada, on behalf of the Government of Canada, I am proposing explicit recognition of a right to self-government, a chance, a new plateau upon which you would develop a better and more productive relationship with all Canadians. I am proposing, with my colleagues, a way to improve social and economic conditions, to preserve language and culture, and constitutional protection of self-government arrangements so that governments cannot unilaterally alter them in the future. During this process, and at any time, I want it clearly understood, I am not asking you today, nor shall I ask you at any time, to yield on any of your beliefs. And I'm not asking you to forfeit any of your rights as we move towards a solution of this historic challenge. Nor am I asking you to accept any arrangement of any kind that would at any time prejudice your rights to ask the courts to decide if self-government is indeed an existing right in Section 35 of the Constitution Act. So in short, I'm asking you, as leaders, to acknowledge the realities surrounding this process and to demonstrate flexibility and political will as well. And to my fellow First Ministers, I ask you quite bluntly to recognize that the essential issue is one of political judgment and political will. This is not one where you can hide behind the legal draftsman. This is a matter of leadership to be exercised by First Ministers. I ask you to demonstrate genuine commitment to the Aboriginal peoples of Canada, to show openness, and to seize this last opportunity to recognize the right to self-government in our Constitution. I ask us all to look beyond our entrenched positions so that we might focus on new and creative solutions. In short, I ask you to acknowledge the right of Aboriginal peoples to be self-governing. So let us together, as First Ministers, as ministers, as leaders of the Aboriginal peoples, to whom so much is owed and to whom so little was tangibly delivered in Canada, let us together demonstrate that we are still true to the vision and imagination that shaped Canada, that benefited so many of us, and let us now share in that same opportunity and hopes and dreams with our Aboriginal leadership here today and Aboriginal peoples across Canada. I now turn to Chief George Erasmus for his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. The AFN is going to start their presentation this morning with a reading of the Wampum Belt, and then I will have a few words.
As Chief George Erasmus of the Assembly of First Nations stated, the AFN is going to begin its presentation today with the presentation of the Wampum Belt. The ceremony that you'll watch now over basically the next 20 minutes, they're going to do it first of all in Algonquin and then they will repeat it in English, is the interpretation of the Wampum Belt, which records for Indian peoples the original historic agreement, in this particular case, between the Algonquin nation and the French and the British nations. That agreement predates the Royal Proclamation of 1763, which confirms the inherent rights of the Indian nation. Now, this ceremony, as I've stated, will take about 20 minutes, or perhaps even a little longer when it's done through both languages, through the native Algonquin language first, and then it will be repeated in English. There will be an explanation by members of the Algonquin nation here in a few minutes as to what they're doing, but you see them now unfolding the Wampum Belt. It actually, as we said, records the original agreement between the Algonquin nation and then, at the time, the French and the British nations. And Wampum Belts are historic documents in each Indian nation because, in many cases, as in this particular one, the native peoples argue that the belt itself is the historic declaration of their inherent right for self-government. But this, a departure in a way from previous conferences where the different native groups used their opening statement as a basic opening statement. To the AFN, clearly at this time, this ceremony will underline what their basic argument is, that there is no need to negotiate here. The right is inherent. They've had it all along. They've never lost it. And it should go into the Constitution in that way, with no further negotiations. But we can take the opportunity as they begin to comment, David Halton, briefly on the Prime Minister's statement. I don't think there were any surprises there. There was a reaching out that everyone has to move a little bit, that they came very close 2 years ago to an agreement, that to get one today, there is going to have to be movement on all sides around the table.
And a very strong appeal as well, Peter, to both sides of the table, basically to avoid getting caught up in legal drafts, and he said the provinces could well hide behind that kind of legal draft approach, but to concentrate on basic principles and to move towards self-government on those basic principles. Prime Minister Mulroney spelled out a few of the main ideas behind the federal position, the fact that, of course, the Government of Canada accepts an explicit right to self-government. They also want a strong commitment in the Constitution to continue negotiations of agreements on what practical form that self-government will take. And finally, he said there must be constitutional protection for any settlements agreed to later in negotiations between Ottawa, the provinces, and the various Aboriginal groups.
All right, it seems that the ceremony now is about to begin. Once again, this will be the presentation by the Algonquins of Barriere Lake, interpretation of the Wampum Belt, recording the original agreement between the Algonquins and the French and the British.
We welcome the First Ministers and our brothers and sisters from across Canada into the ancestral territory of the Algonquin Nation. My name is Jean-Maurice Matchwan, spokesperson for the people of Barriere Lake, who are part of the Algonquin Nation. Our delegation will be presenting to you today the Wampum Belt, which records an historical agreement between the Indian nations and the French and the English nations. Wampum Belts are very sacred to our people. They are used to record our laws and covenants. We will also present the Seven Fire Wampum Belt. I would like to introduce the delegation. Solomon Matchwan, the traditional chief of the Barriere Lake, will read the agreement Wampum in Algonquin.
Miroga Kawabadea Komano Kaijan Metagasano no government a bit Wapskiega Kanagis Quazen and a Snarve. You already got Kunman already Nijika already Kamasanasuch Basic. You already Pamchuhi. In order to work in the Kenagamas, me already agonish, Kainagonish. Already this switch Kainani which me already Kanishnabe. Kaguji Chiog and the show and Kijiniganago, I don't understand. Subscript Kagun visit Chigas, Kijir, and the Snabbing is Kawajima offered. ਮੇਰੇ ਜੀਨਸ ਨਾਸ ਸੋਇਦੀ ਨੋ ਮੀਗੇਗੀ ਕੈਸੇਗੀ ਸਟੋਕ ਬਨਨ ਅਪਿਚੇਗਾ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਗਿਆਸ ਮਾਮੂਈ ਵੈਬਸ ਕੀ ਦਿਸ ਮਾਮਾਨਸ ਨਾਵੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਸਾਸ਼ੋ ਦੀ ਚੀ ਬਾਤ ਕੋਇਦੀ ਕਮਸਨਾਸ ਸੋਇਦੀ ਜੀ ਬਾਤ ਮੇ ਵੇਦੀ ਕੇਵਿਨ ਕਾਗੀ ਕਿਦਸ ਮਕਦੇ ਖੁਨੇ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ Ege imtan ajın kan soga buldu. Ego ikat gidip kanel midas. Ego asmet. Basic tafkut kici goga niga negabiş. Mihu gago masana asa çoydi. Havedi çi batı koma. Ege imtan ajın anışnabe. Mina ken. Mi sene go kattı. Migas. Tawari, or the Boy Lake, will be translating the reading in English.
What our chief has mentioned, this historic agreement between the French-speaking nations and the English-speaking nations and all the Indian nations. According to the reading of this wampum belt that we have seen today, that there had been a negotiation dealing with this land, that the representative of the French-speaking nation on one side and the representatives of the English-speaking nations on the other side, and on the center is the Indian nation. And it was agreed at the time that the Indian nations would always be leaders in their homeland. And anything that was supposed to be negotiated upon, that they would have to negotiate with the Indian people regarding the jurisdictions and how to deal with each other, respecting equality of each nation. That the Indian people would always be the leaders of this continent. And upon finishing this agreement, a representative from the Vatican, the priest, was there to bless this agreement, this historic agreement that had taken place at the time. And he pointed towards heaven when he blessed it. disagreement. We thank you for this opportunity to express what we have shown today. Thank you. Miigwech.
William Kamada of Maniwaki, a River Desert Band, who is the keeper of the wampum, will read the second belt. Patrick DeGonchi and Peter DeGonchi, both of River Desert Band, are here to accompany the keeper.
Our Father, I'm asking this, and I break the Prime Minister and all the ministers at the provincial and also federal, and all the deputies are represented here to hear what we have to say about our wampum belts. And I ask the Creator to put His words in my mouth, not through my will, but through His will, because He is the creator of all things. He created me. Without Him, I wouldn't be standing in front of you ministers here today. But with Him, everything it is possible. And I thank my Creator for this. As you see on this side, we had Newfoundland, which where Beothuk used to live at one time. And the center here, if you could notice, the belt was broken here in the early 1800s. And with our ancestor told us, one day there will be two nations. They'll be completely off the map of North American Indian continent, which we found out at a later date. They are no more Beothuk, and they are also no more Mohican tribe. And the belt told us beforehand. This fire was lit on the east, and he went toward the west out here. I was over in Lethbridge conference about a month or so ago, and I had these belts out here for the first time in the history of Canada or North America. These belts was over out west, and we rekindled the fire, what we see on my far left, and it's going to come toward this way. And I believe from our Western brothers will be responsible for what we will achieve from that visit. And I want to thank Prime Minister for giving me this opportunity, and also all his associates, because it is very sad when we talk about Newfoundland. At one time the license was issued to kill my people, just like we would be issuing the license to kill a moose or a deer or a caribou. I hope this will never take place again, and I want to thank my Creator for giving me this chance to say this. Thank you very much. As you know, this is a very young belt. This belt consists with glass beads from Hudson's Bay Company, the waste bees that you see out here. The belt was made 1796. After the Revolution of the United States. They were negotiating from 1793, and it took them 3 years to finalize the negotiation to divide our country in two. We were not allowed to sit with these people that divide my country. They did it by themselves with the mention, only mention in their treaties what right we would have to repass and pass without any molestation, and bring your tent, your canoe, anything that you own, your personal things, and you could live in the United States 10 years, 15 years, and then come back and live in Canada for another 10, 15 years if you want to. That was the argument made. Today we see it's very different. We are molested. We don't have this freedom any longer. And we are asking you people today, try to come to consensus to remedy this problem we have. Because it's through your people. It's already only 450 years ago you are here. When you came to find us in our country, we were here already 45,000 years. And every water was pure. Everything was pure. The trees, the forests were virgin. Today, you look around, you see the sick animals, you see the sick waters, you see the pollution, everything. And we depend on you people. Try to remedy this before we finish. Thank you very much.
Mutual respect and equality between our nations. It calls for the recognition of our leadership over this land, and provides that your government should not force their laws upon our people. This covenant was confirmed by the Article of Capitalization of 1760 and the Royal Proclamation of 1763. It is significant that this meeting is taking place on Algonquin land. Our people never surrendered these lands. Nevertheless, we are being pressured to remain on reserves. This was not what our ancestors intended. This covenant, which was made with the English and French nations, that is contained in the Wampum Belt, may have faded from your memories, but it has not yet faded from ours. The French are no longer represented as a separate state in Canada, but that does not change matters. They have been accorded a separate province with their own government. We consider the obligations to have become the responsibility of that government. We are disappointed that Quebec is not officially represented at his premier here today to fulfill this responsibility. We are asking the first ministers to honor the agreement of their how do you pronounce this thing? Predecessors by restoring Indian nation to their original position. We must do this for our future generation. Your Constitution must recognize and respect the rights of our people to govern ourselves. We are grateful for this opportunity to make this presentation. Migas ndarak, ugemak, kagi widoko kuwa magija. Kajik kibi vidga kiji vidga nak mix them. Miomage ujma jodam tak aja. Chene ujma jodam tak. Pejmo ke jogo isha gabu maget tuik ke. Kagi jimi ne goi koma. Kegi no teje ke gamet zik. Mega das ndana ko gama kagi gaje ba ma chowena. Kajik ski bidigo na koma megas. Sis mega ndana kana. Udan shina be man. Kama meden endemenjen. Nogum engagé bak. Miwach. Thank you.